Axel Kaiser was shocked by the speech with Milei before the elections in Chile. Well, it seems that you have a certain level of admiration in Chile, Javier.
It's only rock and roll.
It's only rock and roll, but I like it. The Mick Jagger of liberalism, without a doubt. So, obviously, we are delighted to have you in Chile. You have done a lot for freedom, not only in Argentina, but you completely changed the axis of the debate, the urban window. Exactly, and all of Latin America. Javier Milei, even in Spain and beyond, is a reference that when you have clear ideas, you are categorical, consequent, and coherent. Even when the majority is completely against it, the climate of opinion is finally turned around and in favor of freedom in a country as complex as Argentina. I wanted to start, Javier, asking you a very simple question. This talk is called, or conversation, the liberal renaissance. Why liberalism? It's deep, but tell us why you decided to embrace this current idea. Well, first of all, thank you very much to all who have made this event possible. To each of those who are present. And especially thanks to Axel, who is a true giant of ideas of freedom. In that sense, I remember that when just over 10 years ago, I started to go to television. I remember that being liberal was a bad word. It was a kind of insult. It was an insult to people saying liberal or neoliberal, things like that. I mean, if I had been guided by focus group or by polls, I should have been a socialist. So, the relevant question is the one that Axel asks. The question is why. The reality is that the answer is in a wonderful book by Israel Kirchner called Capitalism, Creativity and Distributive Justice. And this now put in my words. One does not defend the capitalism of a free company for a utilitarian question. One defends it because it is the right thing. In that sense, when one does the quantitative review, is that those countries that are freer are 8 times richer than the oppressed. In fact, the lowest degree of distribution is 11 times better than its share in the oppressed country, and it is more like the distribution of income. It takes the format of square hatchai and no more look, also known as world distribution. The median value is below the average. That also means that being twice as good as the average citizen means that it is better than 90% of the population approximately. In fact, in the free countries, there are 25 times less of the poor in the standard format, 50 times less in the extreme format. Those who live in a free system not only have greater political freedoms, but also live 25% more. So, the reality is that this in quantitative terms is overwhelming. And Axel has also been a source of inspiration. To find the answer to this. There's a book that I quote recurrently of Axel,
Más que el economista callejero,
more than the street economist,
creo que me gustó un poquito ese.
and I think I like us a little bit,
Más que la tiranía de la igualdad.
and more than the tyranny of equality.
Brillante de Axel.
There's a brilliant book of Axel. All his books are brilliant,
Pero este tiene algo en particular.
but this is something in particular,
La fatal
the case of the fatal ignorance,
casi parafraseando a Hayek en la
almost paraphrasing Hayek in the fatal arrogance.
en su
And it is that in his first chapter he says,
a pesar de todos los logros
despite all the achievements of the Chilean
se
model,
va a caer.
it will
Se va a
fall,
caer.
and it will fall because we lost the cultural battle. 2009, the book. So that called me to look at the problem.
A mí me llamó a mirar el problema, la lógica del problema.
The logic of the problem,
Creo que quien tiene
and I think that the one who has the best answer
presentada al respecto es justamente Israel.
about it is Israel Kursin,
Porque lo
the
que
bit that I just quoted,
básicamente
because what the socialists basically saying
el sistema es injusto.
is that the system is unfair.
Es decir, la lógica
That is to say, the logic of post-Marxism,
frente a la tremenda
in the face of the tremendous defeat in the economic,
lo económico se expande en otros
that expand another aspect
esta lucha de
and
clases,
leads his class struggle
planos de la vida social.
to other planes of social life.
Y lo único que retiene en el plano de la economía
And the only thing that retains the plane of the economy
el tema de que
is the issue that the capitalist system is unfair.
el capitalista de libre empresa.
The capitalist system is a free company. And in that sense,
En Argentina es más
they in Argentina are more complicated
pero
because they don't even respect the numbers. But supposing that we are arguing with a socialist
un socialista que al menos puede
who can at least make a zero with a glass,
cero con un vaso. Que dicho sea de paso, hay un cabrón que me
what have I said?
pero
By the way, there is a bastard who challenged me. But I mean, he could make me a rhinoscopy, and I would have to pay 2 years of his salary.
que es un delito,
I mean, by the accusation he made me,
digamos,
which is a crime.
no importa.
That bastard, I mean, it doesn't matter.
Pero que
Now
sepa
I
que
remember.
estoy acá,
But let him know I say, I'm here.
delante tuyo, cobarde.
Come and make a rhinoscopy in front of you, bastard.
Y en ese sentido,
And in that sense,
lo que dicen es que el sistema
what they say is that the system
le reconocen que es más productivo,
recognizes that it is more
genera tanta
productive,
desigualdad,
but that it generates so much inequality,
tanta injusticia,
and that it generates so much injustice,
impuestos,
that they are willing to give up
en términos de eficiencia,
in terms of efficiency
tal de
in order to lower inequality and injustice.
justicia. Es decir, como que bueno,
In other words,
admiten que hay un trade-off entre
they admit that there is a trade-off between inequality
que ver con la
and what has to do with efficiency,
como es intolerable ese nivel
and that since that level of inequality is intolerable,
por la idea de la justicia,
we have to give for the idea of social justice.
digo, idea que
He gave the idea that he destroyed a country
o sea, de donde vengo yo.
on the other side of the Cordillera.
Sentido,
That is where I come from. In that sense,
punto que hace Israel
precisely the point that Israel Kaiser makes is,
que el sistema
despite the fact that the system is more productive,
si es injusto no merece ser defendido.
if it is unfair, it does not deserve to be defended.
Y ahí lo que hace
And what Israel Kaiser does is pivot on two ideas.
una es sobre el principio de apropiación
One is on the principle of appropriation of Locke,
y el otro tiene que ver con la idea
and the other has to do with the idea
Hayek del mercado como un proceso de descubrimiento.
of Hayek of the market is a process of
Y
discovery,
entonces no existe tal
and that then there is no such thing as a given cake,
se genere esa
and that
torta
cake
y
is generated,
venga alguien y la reparta de manera
and later someone comes and distributes it in a different way.
que arrastra
That is a mistake that we have been dragging
Stuart Mill,
since the time of John Stuart Mill.
era independiente,
He said that production was independent of distribution,
que vendría a ser algo tan ridículo como decir que
that it would come to be something as ridiculous as saying that
está
a cow's implicit in the amount of steel, leather, rubber, glass,
de cuero, de caucho, de vidrio, digamos, no
Let's say, I don't know what else, if we'll have a car, void of nothing, whatever, and that it is implicit there. No, it is not implicit at all. That is, the market is a process of discovery. You take a car to the market does not want it, and they do not sell any, and in the end they end up breaking, if they fail again. In that sense, there is also a problem of incentives, because if I cannot appropriate the fruit of my work, what am I going to work for? So not only that there is no such thing as a cake, because that cake should be discovered, but also in dynamic terms, it will get worse if I start to touch distribution. And in that discussion and in that dynamic, is that before getting into politics, I was going around the world explaining also that capitalism was not only more productive, but also embraced a set of moral values superior to those of socialism, and that not only had to be defended by its productivity, but had to be defended by its moral values, and that the socialists had won the battle, not because they were better, but because we did not present ourselves to that battle. That is to say, fall of the wall made so evident the quantitative superiority that no one thought about questioning the system. And while they grouped in the Foro de San Pablo, the Soviet Union was planned as an objective, Latin American, and they were successful. I say in Argentina, 4 paid is right. One of Nestor Kirchner, 2 of Cristina Fernandez, now Alberto Fernandez. I say here they have had Tio Lego Sabelit. Well, now they have this. He didn't even mention Boric yet. It's that time. And in Uruguay they had Taber Vázquez, Pepe Mujica. In Paraguay they had Legal. In Bolivia, Evo Morales. In Venezuela, Chávez and Maduro. In Noriega, Nicaragua. In Brazil, Lula and Dilma Rousseff. In Peru, Castillo. Korea and Ecuador. Petro in Colombia. That is, they are a plague. There. The end. See that not only is superiority important in quantitative terms, but the discussion in moral terms is very important. And show that the socialist system is an unjust system, and that the only just system is a free company capitalism. And that is why, well, politics has found me in a situation defending the underlying moral values of free company capitalism, and the invisible hand brought me here. Javier, you mentioned you got into politics. It seemed to you that the intercultural discussion was not enough. You had to go further. And you have quoted several times to Chile as an example of some public policies that you would like to implement. On the subject of public works, for example, I would like to hear that we are in the capital. You could tell us your vision of our country and how it has motivated you or inspired you, some things that have been done here for decades. How do you see us, let's say, before entering more into the Argentine issue itself, while I, for work issues, I, before entering politics, was the chief economist of one of the 3 most important economic groups in Argentina. And I worked for about 15 years. I mean, it's a comment that is worth making, because one of the most important economic grids in Argentina, because one of the political forces, the pseudo opposition, they say that I always failed in the private sector and that they kicked me out of all the places. Well, I was the chief economist for 15 years. Evergreen, that is the biggest, one of the 3 biggest in Argentina, and is part of one of the jobs that we had to do. We were considering a project that is called the Kinkogo Oceanic Corridor, which was a low-altitude tunnel of 52 kilometers, and the route was more than 200 kilometers. And one of the things that we discovered when we came was the private initiative system with the use of guaranteed minimum income, MBRT-type contracts, that is to build, operate, and transfer. And the truth is that this model was developed with the Chicago boys because there was a considerable fiscal deficit. It had to be adjusted, and it was a way not to stop doing infrastructure works without having cost for the state. And that in reality, the only cost that the state should face is the option in the pot in case there was a problem with the project. But that is conditional. That is not executed unless there is a problem with the project. And the experience is also very successful because since it was implemented, only once a project fell, which is the case of the Chacao Bridge. And that also allowed them to make corrections, as they did in the case of Peru, putting way outs. That is, where the first detour is paid by the private, the second by the state, and if that is exceeded, it is reviewed. It is important to understand that this works, because it is a BRT. It is in the long-term fund. At work ends up belonging to the state. So, let's say, the state. What it does is lower the risk of financing and allow the deadlines to be extended. And that projects can be made in conventional situations. It would be very difficult. And then we also add a matter of incentive systems to Switzerland. Specifically, we take the case of the Westward Tunnel. That is, it is a tunnel of more than 35 km. The Swiss had made the San Gotarda, and they had taken a long time. It had gone out much more expensive, and every time a problem appeared inside the tunnel, the incentive was to enlarge the problems, because that involved more public work, so to speak, in a way. And what they did, in the case of the Westward, they leased a door to a company and the other door to another, and they had to compete inside the tunnel. They took much less time, and they saved 20% of the costs. In fact, one of the things, as parts of the tax adjustment program that we are promoting, we want to replicate the model, a private initiative to the Chilean, with these improvements, which also, by the way, some of them were designed by Chileans too, people with whom I had the opportunity to work, and above all, to learn a lot. The truth is that some wonderful professionals, from whom I learned a lot. And of course, the problem with that model is that the money stops passing through the porous hands of politicians. So, for example, when I am going to expose a place, I can be deeply evasive. But certainly, if there was someone sitting here in the Argentine chamber of the corruption, sorry, the Argentine chamber of the construction, they are going to say that I am Dracula for a reason, They are going to say that I am Dracula for a reason. I mean, I mentioned that also. I work for free journalism, and the way for journalism to be free is that it competes. And I want to give them the official agenda, so that, as you will see, anything that they receive from the Argentine media will surely see that I am a monster, that they make comparisons with people truly nefarious from the history of humanity, of Christ, because I am touching their interests. So, what you have to know is that this is not free. Fighting for ideas of freedom. If they do not have a conviction, do not do it. Much less if they think about getting into politics. Because if they are not going to do it with conviction but to not do it, because as our Lord Jesus Christ said, he said, I will throw the worms out of my mouth. So, if you want to do this, you have to do it, but you have to do it with conviction. And moreover, if you want a model of what it is to have conviction and to have hearts, courage, you can look at the history of the first great liberator, which was Marsh, the one who liberated the Jewish people from the hands of the Egyptians. But I'm going to tell you something. When you are in the Torah, Marsh, after leaving Mount Sinai and having seen the Creator, and he meets his brother Aaron, he talks to the religious wise men, and he says, well, let's go and see Ramses. And when he stood in front of Ramses with his brother Aaron, he said, well, let's liberate the Jewish people. Do you know what happened at that moment? Moses and Aaron were left alone. So what I am saying is, be careful that it is not for anyone. If you have to have conviction and the will to carry it out, and know that after this, let's say in the short term, you can find yourself in uncomfortable situations. Moreover, probably, you don't know this data, but it is for you to have an idea of how difficult this task of fighting for the ideas of freedom is, probably, except for those who are present, who are students of the Torah. They don't know that not all the Jewish people left Egypt. Many stayed with the fish, safe in Egypt, and gave freedom, and only 25% left Egypt. Not a minor issue, but there are other ways, as slavery, and socialism knows that. And not only that, on the way to the Promised Land, there were people who wanted to return to Egypt. Why? Because the fish was free. And there's a wonderful phrase by Milton Friedman, may he rest in peace, written in Chicago. He says that there is no such thing as a free lunch. In other words, the free fish is Egypt, it is slavery. The modern counterpoints of that are social programs, assistance programs, where instead, let's say, what do? They give fish to people. Well, we, in that sense, in Argentina, we are also making a revolution, because not only do we want to bring to 1/3 the number of ministries, we want to bring it to 8, but also one of the ministries is a human capital ministry, where there is contention for the fall. But I don't give you the fish. I'm going to teach you how to fish. I don't want slaves. I fight for a free Argentina. Yes, it is very deep and very powerful. What you are saying out of slavery and transiting freedom for food security. As Franklin said, the one who is willing to transiting freedom for security does not deserve neither security nor freedom. Yes, go ahead. I make a note of color, thanks you, because you made me remember. I suggest you emphatically. If one day you go to the United States and they are going to visit you, they're in Stanford, you, they're in San Francisco, in the bays. The rock is Alcatraz, and you can take a walk through Alcatraz, and there is a part that when the walk is almost over, Iga, and where is the basketball court, and the D-sports and so on. And one of the things that he said, and that the tour says, when you are in that moment, he says, look here, the truth is that they had food, they could study, they had this. That is the comforts they had. With respect to others, that is, they had a lot of things. But that was the saddest place of the jail. Just where the recreation part was, it was the saddest place of the jail. Why? Because it was in the bay of San Francisco, and they saw how the city grew, how the city progressed, and they were locked up. They were deprived of freedom. That is, life without freedom is nothing. How many times didn't it touch me in debate to face people who said, but at least in Cuba health is free. It's good, which is a myth. In East Germany, at least, people didn't lack anything, and that reflects that slave spirit. And I want to ask you, you are running to be president of Argentina at this moment and make a profound transformation, a revolution in the sense of the founding fathers of the United States, not that of the French Revolution. Of course, although there is a caste issue, that should also start working, and you have done it. How do you see it? The race? Very little is missing. We are in the final stretch. How would you say your campaign here in Chile is going? It is not so close, but it is going. The Argentine policy. Tell us a little about what that is about. Today, we are in a situation, in conditions to enter the second law, and the reality is that if we enter the second law, I'm the next Argentine president. Now, the path is not easy at all. And since we are calling about interest, because basically the caste is not only the political thieves, the caste also the political thieves, the businessman, the unionists. He gave the workers, the corrupt journalists who live on the state's agenda, the official and the unofficial, and also over, or let's say also those who give a scientific pattern to explain the aberrations of the government, of the state. In that sense, now, at least about a month, where all the time I'm being harassed by all the media. In fact, the last scandal, to put it in some way, has to do with the funding of the campaign. They say that we charge to give candidatures, which is absolutely false. Nobody has been able to prove any of those. Every time there was a denunciation of those characteristics, those people were mocked, and nothing has been able to be proved. It was pure slander. And it is very interesting because basically, each candidature is subjected to a competitive process where each one has to self-finance, and then it will end up realizing what has been spent at the end of the campaign. But it is absolutely revolutionary to say that one is financed with his own effort, with his own work. That is, we do not cost a cent to the taxpayer. Instead, the rest of the political forces are financed with state money. They are financed with taxes. That is, you pay taxes to supposedly have health, education, security, justice. And it happens that the funds deviate to finance the political adventures of corrupt politicians and the journalists, in excess corrupt sons of the porter. Instead of going and investigating the caches of these corrupt politicians, instead are investigating where they get the state money, which is a furious deviation. They pursue us. It is like a situation where the thieves are running to the police. That is, God, it is the world upside down. That is, the one who tries to do things in an honest way is the persecuted and rewards the criminals. That is, Argentina has also a moral problem. For me, stealing is gone. For them, it seems not. Let's see. And La Money, they're watching us because of the streaming right now. Because I do not know if you know, Javier, that we are in one of the most striking corruption scandals that we have had in decades in our country, and that confirms what we have been saying for a long time, that the great state lends itself to all this kind of corruption. Let's see. In the private sector, if you had corruption, it would be manifested in high costs. And if I have high costs, another company can appeal that brings the same product at a lower price, or can offer the same price, a better quality product, or a combination of these. If it breaks me, that is, in a capitalist system or a free company, the own system cleans the inefficient, cleans the corrupt. That is to say, the private sector itself will occupy to purify the system. However, as Reagan said, when the state loses money, it passes you the bill. So they do not have incentives to just because they live in a cult of source of income. So when there is, for example, a public company, that is an oxymoron. It is a contradiction in its terms. It loses money, and they do not make it efficient. because there is no such concept. In the state, what do? They pass you the bill. Well, this is the same. There is no such thing as an efficient state. There is no such thing as a state that does things well, and corruption is inherent in the existence of the state, because far from generating incentives to correct it, it has the incentive to enlarge it. Please. No, I was going precisely to that point. That he touched it perfectly. One of the reasons why you became also an international phenomenon, and with possibilities. Oh, well, they say it was a large neighborhood. Oh, well, it is quite a large neighborhood. The neighborhood is quite large. For Tira, I did not know if the only one, but at least one of the few. I did not know another who predicted with accuracy for many years the catastrophic economic disaster that came in Argentina. I remember that I saw on television. People laughed at what you said to them, and then, when all this was being produced, they began to say, well, it seems that the crazy man was right. Exactly. And in that line, I mean, facts have given you all the reason beyond all discussion. Nobody can doubt it. When you are president, we are talking from the 10th of December to the 20th of December. How have ISA, the project to deal with the gas that has that fine control, the famous iron triangle, the one that Friedman called solar, the structural reforms that Argentina needs to be one of the most prosperous countries in the world are possible? The status quo tyranny. The status quo tyranny, exactly. That we basically, the first thing to understand is that we are thinking about a program that could demand between 40, 50 years. That is, we have a long-term perspective. I mean, we have, as a perspective, the idea of re-establishing Argentina, and that enters a path of grey that in a period of 30 to 40, 50 years, puts Argentina back in a place where it was when the 19th century ended, which was the richest country in the world. Today we are at the parallel type of change in 140 and where about 45% of the poor in a country that produces food for 400 million human beings, where the fiscal pressure on the field is 70%. That is to say that it takes the food of 280 million human beings. Argentina has 5 million Argentinians that cannot afford to eat. If that is not clear, that the present state is part of the problem and not part of the solution, we have a problem. So we want to change its reality of 180 degrees, because if Argentina continues like this, it will be the biggest misery village in the world, and the few happiest too. We are trying. Yes. In that sense, I will say that we are talking about 3 generations of reforms. In the first generation, we are talking about a reform of a state that implies a drastic fall in public spending. We want to eliminate public work by taking a private initiative system to Chile. We want to end the national and provincial and municipal discrepancy. We want to end the economic subsidies by going to a recalibration system of rates where the entire financial and economic equation, the contract and the return rate, is always above the cost of capital opportunity. We want to end the privileges in terms of retirement. Look at what done left over media there. It is clear that the retirement of privileges is a scandal. So I said that I want to eliminate the retirement of privileges. What did the leftover video do? My law wants to end the retirement. They just forgot the word. The other thing we want to do is to move forward in a privatization program so that there are no more state companies in that context. We want to move forward in an unregulated agenda that basically Argentina has 70,000 regulations. We practically have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom. In fact, in the city of Buenos Aires, everything is prohibited except what the head of government allows them to do. So those are all kiosks. Probably the most scandalous kiosk has to do with building permits. There is an extension. There is an IBAN code of how much you can measure, and then you have to thought and analyze and consider the extensions to that code. There the journalists don't start investigating anything. It would be good if they did. But it seems that there is no, or a freight company would charge them a fee of 50,000 pesos a month, so they would pick up a car and pay the fee. A strange thing. But it seems that the journalists care to see how we self-finance the campaign to those businesses. Don't seem to see them, but wanting to do the same thing 3 times, breaking bulldoors to make them come back by destroying the whole city. But they don't see that, and it's obvious. The other thing that we plan in the first generation reforms is obviously a simplification of the imposition system. Argentina has 170 taxes, and this compression for it to be blank and flexible. In addition, we want to move to a system, a modernization of the labor markets, a kind of security and unemployment. And once we make those reforms that make the country competitive in the fiscal plan, competitive in the labor plan, our intention is to open unilaterally the country to international trade. And in parallel, we are making a monetary and financial reform that will eventually eliminate one of humanity's big cheats, which is the central bank. Let's say, look at this. It's very interesting because when you ask a person, well, do you think the dollar is a good currency? And this question, in Argentina, in other countries, but they say yes, yes, of course. And then one asks, what do you think of a currency that in the last 20 years had 80% inflation? No, it's crap. The dollar. So, in that sense, the central banks could be called that's very bad, terribly, and the worst category of all, the Central Bank of Argentina. How do you do to overcome the resistance that you're going to find in the parliament? Because laws have to be approved, etc. So this group, which is not suitable for them, none of these things. Well, there is something very interesting. Unlike the other politicians, we do have a mandate. That is, it is clear that Every win, they are going to judge us if we lower the inflation and if we can reduce or not the insecurity. I say the mandate is very clear. The speech is clear without cracks, forceful. Therefore, everything is clear. What I'm going to do, that is, if they vote me, because they know what I want to do, if we would carry the boss who is here, not say, that is the other leg of misconstruction, that say, and obviously that in this construction, there are also other people who accompany us, also affectionate friends who are four-legged children, Kinemera, Milton, Robert, and Lucas, in the case of Aaron, and obviously my brain head, Axel. And in that context, we present this a uncomfortable truth before a comfortable lie, therefore, that is not free, of course. But it is also true that it generates mandate, that is, people know very clearly, if they vote me, they know very clearly what I am going to do. And in that sense, if we enter the voltage of the presidency, it will be very difficult for politicians, basically, block the reforms because there is a popular mandate. The other is the hypocrisy of the pseudo opposition, because they consider that I have to contribute to the reforms if we do not get to the power or to the executive, but they become great blockers that they will not let them. Thus, but they have the complicity of the media communication, and obviously, then they are not liberals, because then it is worth sending the reforms. If they propose them, then that also shows hypocrisy and the lie of the pseudo-opposition that actually wants to exterminate us, basically because the business is that it is between the Kirchneristas and them, that is, and have all the population anesthetized in that pseudo-crash, when in reality the crack is between the caste, the corrupt, the thieves. Does he sink the country and the people of good apart? It is interesting, because for me to make that proposal, they treat me as a fascist and other things, but they are fascists because they are the ones who make the same proposal. Then the real question is, I say, in front of that proposal, who are the real fascists? Then when you see them always strategically at all these laws that advance on individual freedoms always happen, and they never vote against. Politics, it is always in favor of them, and it is always in favor that they stay where more of our freedom of work, and yet we face them because we want to take the state out of us. They ask for the vote for them to have the power to fix their lives, and there's a collateral effect. There's improved substantially. Instead, we have another approach. We ask for the vote to return the freedom to the people, so that they have the possibility that in freedom to be the owner of the fruit of their work. And thus freedom implies responsibility, to have to take responsibility for the costs, and that is a real evolution, and that should be raised in the plan of morality, of ethics. That is, they maintain a model of looting. The only thing that some say, some do it to the bar, and others say that there is an efficient way to do it. I'm going to do it with an applied case, otherwise it seems very abstract. There is a wonderful book that calls 4,000 Years of Prices and Salaries Controls, and the subtitle is How Not to Fight Inflation, and that book shares that price controls never worked. They want a country where they never worked. Look at the economic plans of Argentina. From 50 onwards, the only period where there was no price control was with the convertibility. That is the only period where there was no inflation. The rest there was always inflation. And that means that the price controls, if there is a case where it shows that they never worked, it is Argentina. Now, the problem of price control lies in not in the stupidity of a tax, but that puts a price below the balance. You look at the cards and say that there is an excess demand and the supply gets smaller, increases the scarcity. That version for done is, but with a category of the last forestry year old can be good. Now for a big man with degree, past degree, doctorate, postdoctorate. Actually, the problem of price control is that it is in advance on private property. Because here is the market is a process, a social cooperation where voluntarily exchange property rights. So in that context, here, what you have is that to advance on the right to property that has costs, then you advance the right to property on a company and the company is going to produce less or not. But more science than that. Then one of the things that happens is that in Argentina there is inflation. Then what do we say to government's piece? Brav and send a patota by the terrors. Yes, of the union they send pacitators to demand to supermarkets that prices did not rise to palosos. I say it is clear that is gay. I say it is clear the violation of the right to property. Now, what does the pseudo-opposition and the pseudo-opposition, what it is something much more perverse. It says, no, how are you going to send to the pacitators? It says, no, you have to send the security forces. That is to say, the pacitators. That is to say, the state's pacatero. Then, let's say, it is not a problem, only that it is run to send to the pacitators, but to send to the pacitators state is also wrong. Now the problem arises that to send to the pacitators, the state requires a legal arrangement that on top of it makes it permanent. Then let's say the deserts end up being worse than the beasts, because at least the damage of the beasts is transitory. These generate permanent damage, and these are the champions of the Republic. Then let me know who the fascist is, the one who wants everything within the state, nothing outside the state. Let's say Mussolini, or let's say the one who doesn't want the state. I say one can understand it philosophically, understands how reality is, and work to take it to its minimum expression to such an extent that at some point technology allows it to be zero, but it is a past. It is a north. But well, there are people who live in the state. Do you know what is the main problem of Argentina? That is not in the books of text. You read The Next Convergence by Michael Spence, and you will understand how it is done so that an economy grows. You can read different books of inflation. You can read mine. They sell out here, and we also know how to end inflation. But do you know what the great problem of Argentina is? That the solution is in the hands as the problem, and the only way to do this and change this is that someone comes from outside, an outsider, and boy, with all the damn status quo, and that we are working. Well, I want to clears. I have two questions to finish. One comes out of the frame of what we have discussed so far, and the other attends to that frame. That is exciting. Yes, there is a topic that here in Chile, in these moments and for a long time, it is very urgent. We have great problems of insecurity, terrorism, crime, obviously also like Argentina, and our government of non-democratic left. I would say one of the advances he wants to do, and obsessively it is very suspicious, is about the rights of decent citizens to have a weapon, to be able to defend themselves in their homes, of criminals, not even to carry it anywhere, but to have it. They want to prohibit everyone, hopefully in their ideal, to have a weapon, and then we are at the mercy of the criminals. What is your philosophy on that issue? I would make a review of who are the ones who prohibited weapons throughout history, and among those two prohibited weapons, I mean the Chinese dictatorship, Stalin and Hitler. I mean there are a couple of pretty ugly guys in there, right? Or I would put it in other terms. What do you think a criminal? One, he has to face when he has to steal 2 houses in one. The inhabitants of the house are armed, and on the other side they are disarmed. Which one is he going to choose? I would say this is the answer. Guys, it doesn't have much mystery. I mean, if you lower the cost to the criminals, the crime increases. When you lower the costs expected to the crime, there will be less criminals. Guys, it is called the beginning of the broken windows. I've read after Ulini, inspired by it. Terry Becker's article from 1968, when he was giving classes at the University of Columbia in New York, and he saw how all this progress was advancing in terms of criminal, which made he reversed the position, right? The victim became the victim, and the victim, well, that implicated a whole degradation of the cost as a crime. And when you increase the benefits, it expands more clearly, full water, very clear for all the topic of being able to defend ourselves. What sense does the right to life have if you don't have the tools to be able to protect it against criminals who have a curious complicity of certain political sectors? Well, there was a saying that says that among firemen, Cholo takes care of Cholo. I mean, and speaking of choros and of characters that should be in the anti-Olympo of the church, do you think Christina is going to jail or not? Let's see. Let's clarify things. I mean, I am working to get to the executive power, And if we are truly Republicans, we should know that justice has to be independent, and the reality is that my commitment is to make justice a truly independent, to be able to remain, let's say, the ropes up, have it. First of all, allowing them to have a financing that does not depend on the executive power, as it happens today. And on the other hand, a judicial career is being raised in such a way that they grow and progress according to their sentences, according to their work, and not according to an agreement or political arrangement. I mean that we are also facing a true revolution in a judicial, and that is that justice is independent, and if justice being independent determines that the robber has to go to jail, that is like that. But someone here is aspiring to the executive power to give an answer on what he would do in a judicial matter. Be careful, because that is a totalitarian, because he does not want an independent justice. And just as he can put a churro in jail, because the survey says that it is convenient for him to put him in jail, he can also put an innocent in jail because he's bothering him. Very clear, Javier. We are reaching the end of this meeting. I want to tell everyone that outside there stands, where they are selling books, the authorship of Javier, also mine and others. Here's the book of Javier, The End of Inflation. You will be able to find it. Here also The Path of a Libertarian. And I am going to take the opportunity to make a personal gift that is my last novel. I take the opportunity to self-promote myself. Say, my dear Javier, maybe one, in those years in which you are already seeing the legacy that you love, call me contemplating the horizon with your 4 later children, some minute to dedicate to this defense of freedom. My friend, thank you very much for everything. Thank you very much. I hope to have you back very soon, hopefully as president. Here we will be waiting for you, and we will be around here, turning around, signing books, etc. Thank you very much to everyone for coming.